She was forced to reveal her wolf at trial. The pack bowed when the Alpha King chose her. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Emily Blackwood stood in the center of the Moonspire Temple, her knees cold against the hard marble floor. The ceremony had ended hours ago, and yet, she was still here, alone. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of the humiliation she had just endured. The pack had watched her, eyes filled with mockery, as she struggled to reveal her true nature. She had hoped, prayed even, that this moment would never come. But now, standing in the middle of the sacred temple, with no one willing to claim her, it was clear that the moon had no mercy on her. Her scent had failed to develop properly, one of the most important traits of an Omega. In a world where your very being was defined by the strength of your wolf, Emily was incomplete. Broken. A failed Omega. She could hear the whispers around her, the words that had followed her for years. Worthless. Unwanted. Her eyes, however, were focused on nothing but the cold stone floor. The other Omegas had been chosen already, their sense strong and their wolves powerful. But not Emily. Emily was invisible. Or worse, she was a mistake. You should go home, child, an elderly voice said from behind her. Emily didn't need to turn to know who it was. Maven Gray, the elder Omega of the pack, had always been the one to offer her kind words, even if they felt like nothing more than hollow comfort now. There is no place for you here. The ceremony is over. The pack has spoken. Emily's throat tightened as she tried to swallow the lump that formed there. She wasn't sure if it was shame, sadness, or something far deeper. But her pride, the last thing she had left, kept her from crying. She couldn't show them how much it hurt. I thought someone would claim me, she whispered, more to herself than Maven. Maven sat beside her, her eyes filled with an emotion Emily couldn't quite place. Perhaps the moon has other plans for you, she said softly. But Emily wasn't sure she believed that anymore. How could the moon have any plans for someone like her? Emily stood, the weight of the rejection pressing down on her. She tried to shake it off, to stand tall, but her legs felt weak, and her heart felt heavier than ever before. She had always dreamed of being chosen, of finding her place among the pack, but now it seemed impossible. She was unclaimed, unwanted. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden voice from the shadows. A deep, commanding voice. Miss Blackwood? Emily's heart skipped a beat, and she turned, expecting nothing more than another member of the pack coming to offer her pity. But what she saw stunned her. A tall man, dressed in dark robes, with silver eyes that seemed to pierce through the dim light. He moved slowly toward her, leaning on a cane. His face was partially obscured by a thick beard and unruly hair, but the intensity in his eyes was undeniable. I apologize for the intrusion, he said, his voice strained but clear. I was told I might find an Omega here, one who might be willing to consider an unusual arrangement. Emily frowned, her confusion growing. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, the man continued, his voice steady but low. The ceremony has ended, I see. But perhaps, Miss Blackwood, you have yet to find your place among your people. His words hung in the air, and Emily couldn't quite understand why, but there was something in his tone that felt different. Something that made her pulse quicken. Who are you? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. The man's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. I am King Alexander Thornridge. And I believe you are the one I have been searching for. Emily's heart raced as she looked up at the man before her. King Alexander Thornridge. Ever encountered. The way he stood, his posture straight despite the cane he leaned on, radiated power, and yet, there was a hint of pain in his movements, as if he carried a burden too heavy for even someone of his stature to bear. For a moment, Emily could only stare at him, unsure of what to say. You're the Alpha King, she finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. His eyes softened slightly, a glimmer of understanding flashing across his face. I am. And I have been searching for you, Miss Blackwood, he replied, his voice deep and measured, carrying an authority that made her feel both small and significant at the same time. Emily took a step back, her mind racing. Why was he here? What could someone like him want with someone like her? But, why? Why would the Alpha King be searching for me, she asked, her words tinged with confusion. Because you are the one who can help me, Alexander said, his gaze never leaving hers. Emily blinked, stunned by his words. Help you, she repeated, trying to comprehend what he was saying. I do not understand. Alexander's expression hardened for a moment, as if the weight of his next words was almost too much to bear. There is a curse on my bloodline. A curse that has made me weak, and I cannot break it alone, he explained. Emily's mind spun. A curse? The Alpha King cursed? It seemed impossible, but there was something in the way he spoke that made her believe him. What do you need from me? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. You are the key to breaking this curse. I need you to help me, to stand by my side, he said, his tone both serious and imploring. Emily could hardly believe what she was hearing. She had been nothing more than an outcast, a broken omega, for as long as she could remember. Why would the Alpha King choose her? But I'm nothing. I don't even have a wolf, she whispered, her voice breaking. You are more than you know, Emily. You have something within you that no one else does. A strength that I need. You are my mate, the one destined for me, Alexander said, his voice softening as he spoke. Emily's heart skipped a beat. His mate? She had never even considered the possibility of having a mate, let alone someone as powerful as the Alpha King. She shook her head, trying to clear the confusion that had clouded her thoughts. I'm not who you think I am, she said, her voice trembling. Alexander stepped closer to her, his eyes filled with a deep, unwavering intensity. You are exactly who I need, Emily. And I will not let anyone else claim what is rightfully mine. His words sent a shiver down her spine. She wanted to pull away, to deny everything he was saying, but there was something in his gaze that made her heart ache, something that made her feel like she had finally found where she truly belonged. I'm not strong, Emily said, her voice barely a whisper. Alexander's eyes softened as he reached out to her, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. You are stronger than you think, he said. And together, we can face whatever comes our way. Emily looked up at him, her heart racing. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had a place in this world. A world she had always felt so out of place in. And now, standing before the Alpha King, she knew that her life was about to change forever. As Alexander leaned in, his voice dropped to a whisper, Will you help me, Emily? Will you stand by my side? Emily swallowed, her throat dry, and for the first time in her life, she felt a surge of determination. Yes, she whispered, the word barely escaping her lips. But as soon as the word left her mouth, she felt it, a spark, an undeniable connection, a bond that was meant to be. And she knew, in that moment, that her life would never be the same again. As the days passed, Emily could hardly believe the changes that had occurred in such a short time. Her life had been turned upside down, and everything she had known seemed so distant now. The Alpha King, Alexander Thornridge, had claimed her as his mate, and despite all her doubts, there was no denying the powerful connection they shared. At first, Emily had been overwhelmed by the idea of being the mate of the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories. She had never considered herself special, let alone worthy of such a title. But every day with Alexander made her realize that there was something within her that she had yet to discover. He had made it clear from the beginning that he believed in her strength, in a way that no one else ever had. They spent hours together, talking, learning about each other, and exploring the bond they were beginning to form. There were moments when Emily felt like she was walking in a dream, unsure of whether any of it was real. But Alexander was always there, his presence steady and reassuring. He had a way of making her feel safe, even when the weight of their situation seemed so heavy. One afternoon, as the sun began to set over the castle grounds, Alexander led Emily to the balcony that overlooked the vast forest below. The air was crisp, and the scent of pine filled the space between them. He stood behind her, his hands resting gently on the railing as he looked out at the horizon. "Do you ever wonder how we got here?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with an intensity that made Emily's heart flutter. She turned to face him, a soft smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Every day," she replied. "I never imagined I would be standing here with you, in this place." He stepped closer, his eyes locking with hers. "And yet, here we are," he said, his voice low. "Destiny has a way of guiding us, even when we don't understand it." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine at his words. There was something undeniable about the connection they shared. It wasn't just the bond of mates, but something deeper, something that called to her on a level she couldn't explain. Alexander reached out, his fingers brushing lightly against her cheek. "You're everything I never knew I needed," he said, his voice filled with a quiet admiration that made Emily's breath catch in her throat. She could feel the intensity of his gaze, the weight of his words, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. "And you're everything I've always longed for," she whispered, her voice barely audible. There was a moment of silence between them, and in that silence, Emily knew that everything had changed. She wasn't just Emily Blackwood anymore. She was his mate, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they stood there, side by side, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the sky. Emily knew that this was just the beginning of a journey she never could have imagined. A journey that would take her far beyond the walls of the castle and into a future that was uncertain, but filled with hope. Alexander took her hand in his grip warm and steady. "Are you ready for what comes next?" he asked, his voice filled with determination. Emily looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time in her life, she felt ready. "I'm ready," she said, her voice strong and sure. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way, side by side, united by a bond that was unbreakable. As the days passed, Emily settled into a new routine. Life within the castle was far from what she had imagined it would be. At first, she had thought that everything would be different, the power, the royal expectations, the constant watch of the pack. But Alexander made it feel like home. He was always by her side, guiding her, teaching her the ways of his world. The pack, at first hesitant and full of doubt, slowly began to accept her as their Alpha King's mate. They watched her carefully, as if waiting for her to prove her worth. Emily, for her part, felt the weight of their scrutiny. She had always been the one to hide, to stay out of the way, but now, she was at the center of everything. Every action, every decision she made was observed, analyzed, and judged. But Alexander stood by her, always reminding her of the strength she didn't even know she had. One evening, as they walked through the royal gardens, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The air was crisp, and the scent of blooming flowers filled the night. Alexander walked beside her, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a constant reassurance. "You seem quiet tonight," he said, his voice soft, yet laced with concern. Emily smiled, though it was more of a sigh than a smile. "I'm just thinking," she replied. "About what?" he asked, his silver eyes searching her face. Emily hesitated for a moment before speaking. "About how everything has changed. I never thought I would be here. Never thought I would be someone others would look to. I was always the one hiding in the shadows, trying to make myself invisible." Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her, his hand gently lifting her chin so she could meet his gaze. "You were never meant to be invisible, Emily. You were meant to shine. I've seen the strength in you from the very beginning. You may not see it, but I do." His words were like a balm to her soul, soothing the insecurities that had been a part of her for as long as she could remember. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone," he continued. "Just be yourself. That's enough for me." His reassurance lifted a weight from her chest, but it didn't completely erase the doubts she carried. It was hard for her to believe that she could truly belong in this world, a world where power, strength, and status were everything. But Alexander believed in her. That was enough to make her want to try. They resumed walking, the silence between them comfortable now. As they approached the fountain in the center of the garden, Emily paused, looking at the water. The reflection of the moon danced on the surface, its light illuminating her face. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "what it would be like if things were different? If I didn't have this bond with you?" Alexander stepped closer, his warmth radiating against her back as he stood behind her. "I've wondered," he said, his voice low. "But the truth is, this bond, this connection, it's part of who we are now. And no matter what, we are meant to be together." Emily turned to face him, her heart beating faster with every word he spoke. "I don't know what the future holds," she whispered, "but I know I want to be with you. No matter the challenges, no matter the uncertainty." Alexander smiled, his eyes softening with affection. "Then we will face it together," he said, reaching for her hand. As their fingers intertwined, Emily felt a surge of warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel alone. She didn't feel like the broken Omega she had once been. She felt like she truly belonged. Together, they would face whatever came next, united by the bond they shared. And in that moment, Emily knew that no matter the challenges ahead, she was ready to face them with Alexander by her side. Emily stood beside Alexander, her heart racing as they walked through the ancient halls of the castle. It had been days since she had agreed to stand by his side, to face the challenges of their bond together. But the weight of it all was beginning to feel heavier than she expected. The pack, though slowly coming to accept her, still watched her with scrutiny. She was no longer the invisible Omega she once was. She was the mate of the Alpha King, and that brought with it both respect and fear. As they approached the grand dining hall, the sound of voices echoed through the air. The atmosphere was tense, as it always was when they were in public. Emily could feel the eyes of the pack members on her, their whispers trailing behind her like an invisible thread. She had never been one for attention, but now, with Alexander by her side, it was impossible to avoid. The doors to the hall opened, and they stepped inside. The long table was filled with high-ranking members of the pack, each of them looking up as the Alpha King and his mate entered. Emily felt the weight of their gazes, but she kept her head high. She was no longer the weak, rejected Omega. She was his mate. She belonged here. "Emily," Alexander said, his voice soft, but with a hint of command. "Come, sit beside me." He led her to the head of the table, where the seat beside him was vacant. She had never been to such a formal gathering before, and the gravity of the situation was not lost on her. As she sat down, she could feel the eyes of the entire room on her, and a knot tightened in her stomach. But Alexander's presence beside her was a constant reassurance. He placed a hand gently on her back, his fingers warm against her skin, grounding her. "Relax," he whispered, his voice just for her. "You're not alone." Emily nodded, trying to calm her nerves. She was here for a reason. She was meant to be by his side, to help him, to be the one who stood with him through everything. The meal began, and the conversations around the table grew louder. Emily listened, though her attention kept returning to Alexander. There was something about the way he carried himself, the way he commanded respect from everyone in the room, that both awed and intimidated her. He wasn't just a king, he was a force of nature. And yet, when he looked at her, his eyes softened. She was the only one who saw that side of him, the side that wasn't burdened by leadership or responsibility. He was just Alexander when he was with her. As the meal continued, the tension in the room seemed to dissipate. Emily was no longer the subject of whispers and sidelong glances. The pack, though still cautious, had begun to accept her presence. Alexander had made sure of that. He had shown them that she was his equal, his mate, and that no one would dare question her place by his side. After the meal, Alexander stood, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the pack. "I know you all have your doubts," he began, his tone firm yet compassionate. "But I trust Emily. She is not here to take my place, nor to challenge any of you. She is here to stand with me, to be my partner in everything. And from this day forward, I ask that you treat her with the respect she deserves." Emily looked up at him, her heart swelling with pride. She wasn't just a pawn in his world. She was a part of it. She was his partner. And that was all she needed to know. The pack, though hesitant, bowed their heads in respect. And for the first time since she had arrived at the castle, Emily felt truly at home. She had a place here. A place beside Alexander. As they walked out of the dining hall together, Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. The future was still uncertain, but with Alexander by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. Together, they would navigate the challenges of the pack, the curse on Alexander's bloodline, and everything else that stood in their way. But Emily no longer feared what lay ahead. She was ready to face it all with him. Because now, she knew, she wasn't just Emily Blackwood anymore. She was the Alpha King's mate. And nothing could change that. Days turned into weeks, and Emily found herself adapting to her new life as the mate of Alexander Thornridge, Alpha King of the Northern Territories. It was not always easy, and she still felt the weight of the pack's eyes on her, but with every passing day, she became more confident in her role. The castle, once a place of cold stone walls and intimidating halls, was slowly becoming a home for her. She spent her days by Alexander's side, learning about the responsibilities that came with being an Alpha's mate. Alexander was a patient teacher, guiding her through the intricacies of pack dynamics, the politics of the territories, and the expectations that others had of her. Despite all the challenges, Emily felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She was not just a mate to Alexander, she was an integral part of the pack, and that realization filled her with a quiet pride. One afternoon, as the sun set over the distant mountains, Emily stood by the window of their chambers, looking out at the changing colors of the sky. The soft glow of the evening light bathed the castle grounds in a warm hue, and for a brief moment, everything felt perfect. Alexander walked up behind her, his presence as steady as ever. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice gentle, though there was a hint of curiosity in it. Emily turned to face him, a smile playing on her lips. "Just how much things have changed," she replied. "I never thought I'd be here, living this life. But now, it feels like I've always been a part of it." Alexander stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers. "You have always been a part of it," he said, his voice filled with certainty. "I knew from the moment we met that you were meant for this. You may not see it, but you are already making a difference." Emily's heart fluttered at his words. She had always doubted herself, but with Alexander's constant support, she was starting to believe in her own worth. "I still have so much to learn," she admitted. "But I'm willing to try. For you. For the pack." Alexander smiled, his eyes softening. "And that's all I could ever ask for." The connection between them was undeniable, and every moment they spent together only strengthened the bond they shared. But the challenges were far from over. The pack, though they had begun to accept her, still held her at arm's length in some ways. Emily could feel the weight of their expectations, the lingering doubts that still haunted the pack members. They needed to see her as more than just the Alpha King's mate. They needed to see her as a leader in her own right. One evening, as they gathered in the grand hall for a meeting with the pack's elders, Emily sat beside Alexander, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was filled with murmurs as the pack members took their seats. Emily's nerves threatened to overtake her, but she steadied herself. She was not the broken Omega anymore. She was his mate. And she was ready to prove her place among them. Alexander rose to speak, his voice commanding the attention of the room. "We are gathered here today to discuss the future of the pack," he began. "As many of you know, I have found my mate, Emily. And together, we will lead this pack into a new era of strength and unity." His words were met with nods and murmurs of agreement, but Emily could feel the weight of the eyes on her. They were waiting for her to speak. It was a test. A test to see if she truly belonged. She stood, her heart racing as she faced the pack. "I may not have been born into this life," she began, her voice steady despite the nervousness that still lingered. "But I have seen the strength of this pack, and I know what we are capable of. I stand by Alexander, not as a symbol, but as his partner. Together, we will build a future where every wolf, every member of this pack, has a voice." There was a moment of silence, and then the room erupted into applause. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she looked at the pack, their faces filled with a new respect. It was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she had feared, and yet it was the moment that proved to her that she truly belonged. As the applause faded, Alexander stepped closer to her, his hand finding hers. "You did it," he whispered, his voice filled with pride. Emily smiled, feeling a surge of warmth in her chest. "No, we did it," she replied. And in that moment, as she stood beside Alexander, she knew that their journey was only just beginning. Together, they would face whatever came next, with the strength of their bond and the pack behind them. Weeks passed, and Emily continued to grow into her role by Alexander's side. The castle, once a place of uncertainty and fear, was now a place where she began to find her confidence, not just as his mate, but as a leader in her own right. With each passing day, the pack's acceptance of her grew, and with it, her sense of belonging. Yet, there were still challenges ahead. Alexander had not hidden the fact that his bloodline carried a curse, a shadow that hung over their future. He had shared with her the weight of his responsibilities, the pressure of his leadership, and the fear that the curse would one day consume him. Emily listened intently, supporting him in ways she never thought possible. But despite the growing bond between them, the pack, and the castle, Emily could not shake the feeling that something was amiss. She often found herself standing by the window in their chambers, looking out over the vast lands that stretched beyond the walls of the castle, wondering what the future truly held. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of violet, Alexander came to stand beside her. His presence was comforting, as always. "You're lost in thought," he said softly, his voice a soothing balm to her worries. Emily turned to face him, her heart heavy with unspoken thoughts. "I've been thinking about the future," she confessed. "About what lies ahead for us, for the pack, for you." Alexander's silver eyes softened as he reached for her hand. "You are part of my future, Emily. And whatever comes, we will face it together. This curse, it won't define us." His words were a comfort, but Emily couldn't help but feel the weight of their situation. She knew the curse was real, and she knew that Alexander's strength, as powerful as it was, couldn't protect him forever. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But what if it's too much for us to handle?" Alexander stepped closer, his hand gently cupping her face. "We will never know until we face it. And we will face it, together." Emily nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. She had always feared the unknown, but with Alexander beside her, she knew she was stronger than she had ever been before. The weight of their future seemed lighter now. They were no longer just two individuals thrown together by fate. They were partners, a team. And that thought gave Emily the strength she needed. "You've changed me, Alexander," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Before you, I was lost. I didn't believe in myself, in anything. But with you, I feel like I can do anything." Alexander smiled, his eyes softening. "And you've changed me, Emily. You've shown me what it means to truly care, to love without fear. You are my strength." The words hung between them, a promise of something more than just a bond. It was a partnership built on trust, respect, and love. And in that moment, Emily realized just how far they had come. They were not the same people they had been when they first met. Together, they had grown into something stronger, something unbreakable. The challenges that lay ahead would not be easy. There would be battles, both internal and external. But Emily knew one thing for certain: as long as they stood together, they would face whatever came their way. And with that thought in her heart, she took Alexander's hand, knowing that their journey had only just begun. Whatever the future held, they would face it side by side, united in their strength and their love. As Emily and Alexander continued to grow together, so did the weight of their responsibilities. The curse that haunted Alexander's bloodline was never far from their thoughts. Though they had conquered every challenge that had come their way, the looming shadow of the curse remained ever present. Emily had tried to push it from her mind, focusing instead on the present, on their bond, and on the pact they were building together. But Alexander, ever the protector, could not ignore the dark reality that hovered over them. One evening, as they walked through the gardens of the castle, the crisp air felt different, charged with an unknown energy. Emily looked at Alexander, her heart heavy with the unspoken tension between them. "You've been quiet," she said, her voice soft but filled with concern. "What's on your mind?" Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her, his silver eyes searching hers. "I've been thinking about the curse," he admitted, his voice filled with a quiet, almost weary, resignation. "It's always there. In the back of my mind. No matter what I do, it never leaves me." Emily's heart ached for him. She had seen the weight of the curse in his eyes, had felt the darkness that sometimes threatened to overtake him. But she also knew the strength he had within him. "But we've faced it together, haven't we?" she said, reaching for his hand. "We've gotten through every challenge. And we'll get through this one, too. Together." Alexander squeezed her hand, his eyes softening with the love he held for her. "I don't want to drag you into this, Emily," he said, his voice quiet. "I don't want the curse to hurt you. You've already done more for me than anyone ever has." Emily shook her head, her heart swelling with determination. "I'm not afraid of the curse," she said firmly. "I'm afraid of losing you. I'm afraid of seeing you suffer alone. We're in this together, Alexander. That's what matters." Alexander's gaze softened as he looked at her, and for a moment, the weight of the curse seemed to lift, if only slightly. He pulled her into an embrace, his arms wrapping around her as if she were the only thing that mattered in the world. "I don't deserve you," he whispered into her hair. "But I am so grateful for you." Emily rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You don't have to deserve anything, Alexander," she whispered back. "You're everything to me. And we will find a way through this, no matter what." They stood there for a moment, the world around them fading as they held on to each other. The future, with all its uncertainties, felt a little less daunting in that moment. Emily knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome, but as long as they had each other, she believed they could face anything. The night fell around them, the stars twinkling above as if offering their quiet support. Together, they walked back to the castle, side by side, their bond unbroken. Emily had no idea what the future would bring, but she was no longer afraid. She was ready to face whatever came next, with Alexander by her side, and together, they would conquer whatever darkness threatened to tear them apart. The weeks following their quiet conversation in the garden brought a new sense of calm to Emily's life. Alexander's unwavering support and their growing connection gave her strength. Together, they continued to face the many challenges that came with their roles, not just as alpha and mate, but as leaders of the pack. While the pack's respect for Emily had deepened, there were still moments of doubt, moments when she could feel the weight of their expectations pressing against her. She often caught herself wondering if she was truly the right one to stand by Alexander's side, to help him lead this powerful pack. But every time those doubts surfaced, she thought of the bond they shared, the connection that had brought them together and had only grown stronger with time. She thought of the way he looked at her, with so much trust and love, and it made her believe in herself. One evening, as Emily sat in the royal library, her fingers tracing the spines of ancient books, Alexander entered, his presence filling the room. She looked up and smiled, her heart warming at the sight of him. He had changed in so many ways since they had first met, his strength and leadership now tempered with a tenderness he had only shown her. "I didn't mean to disturb you," Alexander said, his voice soft. "You're not disturbing me," Emily replied, closing the book she had been reading. "I was just thinking." "About what?" he asked, stepping closer to her. "About everything," Emily said, her eyes meeting his. "The future, our pack, this life we're building together. Sometimes I still can't believe how far we've come." Alexander smiled, the weight of the world easing from his shoulders when he looked at her. "We've come so far because of you, Emily. You've helped me see what I've been missing." His words meant more to her than she could express. She had always felt like an outsider in the world of wolves, but with Alexander by her side, she had found her place. "I never thought I could be part of something like this," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But now, it feels like I was always meant to be here." Alexander gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing over her skin. "You were always meant to be here, Emily. I knew from the moment I saw you that you were the one I needed." Emily closed her eyes at His touch, the words settling deep in her heart. She had never felt so seen, so understood. "You don't have to do this alone," she whispered, her hands resting on his chest. "I'm here, always." Alexander's gaze softened as he leaned in, his forehead resting gently against hers. "I don't ever want to face this alone, Emily. I've always carried the weight of the world on my shoulders, but with you, I feel lighter. I feel like we can face anything." Emily's heart swelled with love for him. She knew they still had obstacles to overcome, that the curse on his bloodline loomed in the distance, but in that moment, none of that seemed as important as the bond they shared. The future might be uncertain, but they had each other. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Emily knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. They had already proven that their love and their bond were stronger than any challenge. And with that knowledge, Emily felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The Alpha King was no longer just a ruler of the pack, he was her partner, her mate. Together, they would lead the pack into a new era of strength, unity, and love. And for the first time in her life, Emily felt like she had finally found where she truly belonged.